Welcome again to the Chua lecture series. This is lecture number 4, 10 more things you didn't know about memristors. I want to remind people that this is not only a review of theory and ideas from the dusty old ages. This is actually very new material, and in fact, those of you who are participating have the opportunity to interact and help create new advances in understanding and theory as we go through the exercises and challenges that Leon has been making. So with that, let me welcome Leon for lecture number 4.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. I'd like to point out requesting some feedback from you. We've been about 1/3 through the course, and it's time for you to grade me and ask you for your suggestions. Especially, there are some people way out there, I understand, that are tuning in who did not register, but are tuning in through some screen in some classroom. So I do like to know who you are, and maybe we can interact in the future as well. So appreciate if you would send me your email, at least your name and your organization and whatever you want to. Okay, today we're going to talk 10 more things that you didn't know, and in fact there are even more, 10 more, but we're going to stop somewhere. Let me begin by addressing the reader. Always, we got a reader always in the past. So the last reader was to ask you to create a memristor that is a self-dual. And so let me quickly review that a dual memristor is simply created, say the one on the left is created by changing you Q to phi and phi to Q. And if you want to compare them, we can redraw it so that the vertical axis is Q, and I use a symbol with a tilde on top as the dual. So you see the dual of this memristor on the left is the one on the right. By the way, a simple way to understand dual, if you draw on the same vertical axis as charge, then it just passes a 45-degree line, and it should be a mirror image along a 45-degree line. So if you imagine a 45-degree line there, you will get that, or vice versa, because the dual of a memristor is another memristor, and the dual of that is back to itself, okay? All right, so in general, the point here is that a dual of a memristor or an inductor or capacitor is almost always another device. So if you have a, say, interesting circuit that's already been built, and you want to build the dual of that, you're going to have to first draw the dual circuit with some standard procedure that we didn't have time to go through. But you're going to end up with dual devices like that you have to go out and buy, or if not, create yourself, okay? A self-dual memristor is a challenge because you're supposed to get something that is itself. So how can that be? Well, look at the top memristor with the two-segment curve, the vertical and the horizontal red line. So the dual of that will be on the right by changing from phi to Q and Q to phi, and then put a tilde. So it means it's another memristor, right? And now if you want to make the vertical axis the same as flux so that we can compare, so I just rewrote that, and that will give you one below on the right bottom corner. And now, normally you would say you go out and buy that one, but look at the original memristor on the left again. And if you just transpose the two wires, then it's the same memristor, right? But you notice that the current and voltage becomes negative. So that if you plot that in this I tilde V tilde, and enclose that into a box and think of that as the new memristor, in the I tilde V tilde frame, you see that the phi Q cap will be the one on the left, lower left corner. And that is exactly the dual that we want. So this is a real flux that the dual of this memristor is just the same memristor, but just transpose the wire. So that's the answer. In fact, that's the only memristor that is self-dual. So this is an exercise for you to understand what duality means, okay? All right, let me move on. A quick review. We spoke last time that there are really a more general classes memristor than ideal memristor at the center blue circle. So this is a Venn diagram. The most general is called the extended memristor, and everything else is actually a special case of that. So everything. So let me start with the most general. The extended memristor is just described by Ohm's law, as all of them are described by Ohm's law. It's just how complicated it is, the equation of the resistance. The one on top is the most complex, where the resistance could depend not only on the state variable x, but also on the current I, with the important proviso that when I is 0, that thing doesn't blow up. Okay, that's critical. You have seen a good example last week, that if you do not allow that proviso, you're going to end up with nonsense. You're going to have a capacitor that would qualify, and you wouldn't want to call it a capacitor memristor or vice versa. Okay, and these are the formula that summarize everything. But you have the current control, and then the dual case voltage control, or vice versa. So this why dual is such an important, useful thing. You only need to remember one half of the things, and they are very simple procedure now. Given a memristor, in other words, you made an experiment and you found out it's pinch loop. So it's got to be a memristor. The question is which type, and these are standard procedure that very simple. If we have time later, we're going to come back and go through that. But the point is just by making a few simple tests, you can tell whether you have ideal memristor, a generic one, or ideal generic, or extended. Okay. But two important part of the ideal, the original memristor, is that it's always symmetrical. I call it the symmetry property, in the sense that the pinch hysteresis loop under sinusoidal excitation is always asymmetric, and that the amplitude it has the amplitude independence property, the resistance of the linear IV curve. You know, when you go to high frequency, it becomes linear. But in general, the curve, the slope of the limiting curve depends on the input waveform, the amplitude, but not for the ideal memristor. So you have a way to tell whether you have an ideal memristor or not. Okay, and that was what I call earlier the fingerprint, the hysteresis. But now the signature is that when your input is not a periodic signal like that one, and you notice that in this case the input is a voltage, the red curve here, but the current would always go through the same zero crossing. For the ideal memristor, this is always the case, but it's not necessarily that the response, in this case the response is a blue curve, that it has always have to go through at the same time as the red curve, as the input. It can have more. For example, here's an example of a memristor on the upper left corner, and that's a memristor that is not monotone increasing. That's an active and locally active memristor. This is a concept that we're going to introduce next week, by the way. And by virtue of the fact that it is active, you notice on the lower right corner, where the red curve is the input current source. You see the sine wave. And notice, the blue curve on the lower right is the current source. And notice that the response, which is the red voltage, not only passes through the same point where the blue curve goes through, but it also has other crossing points. And so when you see that, you would know that you have an ideal memristor, for example. So, for example, in this upper curve, the red curve in this case is the input, the current. And the blue curve not only have to go through where the red curve goes through zero, but it have additional points. Vice versa on the bottom curve, it is now the red curve is the voltage source. And the blue curve is the response, the current, and again, it of course has to go through where the red curve crosses the axis, but it also has additional crossing points. These are the two signatures that would tell you that they are active memristors, for example. So these are important sort of simple tests. Here's an example of when neither of them is periodic, okay? And the red curve is the input, the I current, the I. But the blue curve is the response. And notice that this, by the way, you've seen this in the chaotic circuit, memristor circuit from last week. I went through it very fast. This is now an amplification, enlargement of that. You will notice that the red curve, again, as I say, is the input. It's clearly it's not periodic. And the blue curve, notice that it, of course, go through where the red curve go through the axis. But in addition, look at the first sharp peak on top. You see they already go through a point where the red curve didn't go through. So this indicate immediately that it is an active memristor, but more important, it tells you it's current control. The independent variable is current. So this is why it's so important. These are signatures, okay? Now, there are two types, by the way, of pinch hysteresis loops. The first one is what I call transversal, which means that the hysteresis loop actually crosses each other. And the second one is called non-transversal, means it actually just kisses each other. It's just a tangent. I'll show you. This is a HP memristor that was published in Nature. That was the hysteresis loop on top. And notice it's pinch. And it crosses at an angle. So that's called transversal. Now, below it is the memristors. And by virtue of the fact that it touches, and it crosses transversally, there are two resistances, even at the origin. All the other points, of course, there are two resistances, which means that you would expect a memristance to be a circular thing. There should be no intersection. So there you are. You have where the hysteresis is pinched, the memristance is not going to be pinched. Okay, and by the way, you notice also that there is some part of over the upper top hysteresis loop at the upper corner where there is a little negative slope. Some people start to say, "Oh, that's a negative resistance," and I'm going to tell you that that's not that's an artifact. It's not a negative resistance at all. Okay, and in fact, let me backtrack a bit. You see this is the waveform. The first two are the current and the voltage that gives right the pitch loop. The next one is the state variable that in the Nature paper is called W. That's our X, okay? But below that is the slope along the pinch loop. And you can in this see there are some small segment that is actually negative, but that it doesn't mean it's negative resistance. I'll show you why later on. Okay, now here's another example. A thermistor is NTC or negative temperature coefficient thermistor has the pinch hysteresis that look like this. Notice that it's tangent, it's kissed, it's at the origin, and because of that, the slope at the origin is unique. It's one. There's not double. So when you draw the in this case, it's the conductance. So it's the memductance. You see that it's pinch. Okay, so those are really useful sort of things to look for, and you know how to classify them, whether it's transversal or non-transversal. Okay, all right. Let me move on. Go back to a typical pinch loop, and notice that this is just at one instant of time. If we pick up that blue point, but as you move on, this should just move on. So this blue chord is actually stripping and then go back down. If you just restrict your attention to the first quadrant, this is a bit like a windshield wiper. So it's doing that, go left and right. And there is a relationship. If you have an ideal memristor, by the way, on the left side, big idea means that you have a phi curve, so you can think of a slope. In fact, that's called a memristor. The slope at any given instant of time, Q, is called a memristor. But if you look at the corresponding pinch loop at the same instant of time, you will see that the chord at the same instant is going to be exactly the same slope. So that's the relationship. But if it's not ideal, then you cannot think about a small signal. It's only when it's ideal, okay? All right, now, so negative slope, by the way, does not imply local activity. That's what's very important, okay? A locally passive memristor can exhibit a region with a negative slope, such as the example you have seen, in its associated pinch hysteresis loop in the V versus I plane. It follows that the negative slope in the pinch hysteresis loop does not imply the corresponding memristor is locally active. That's a misconception by many. When you see a negative, it's this is active, but that's not true. Okay, so that's important. Now recall then that I posted a $1,000 prize last week, and indeed it was solved almost immediately. There were two. Dr. Williams, by the way, the first one to send in the solution, the correction on the next day, 23rd. And then Yen Xing Xu sent me the same correct solution on 26th. And just yesterday, too late for me to include it, is Professor Fernando Corinto from University of Torino, from somewhere in Italy. Also sent in, so there were three correct solutions, okay? So I have decided I'm going to make an even more interesting prize problem by generalizing this prize problem, and I up the ante to 1,500. And Dr. Williams was kind enough to throw in the $1,000 prize and put it back into the pot. So now I'm going to come back to the detail about it, but before I want to point you the point that in this example, this was the $1,000 prize with the Hamiltonian given in the square box there. All the solutions, if you will recall, I didn't have a slide with me. Head toward, no matter where you start initially, all head toward the horizontal axis where the state variable is, but it never reaches the axis until infinite time. And that's important. For example, if you plot the voltage versus current relationship from any initial point, it seems that it goes to zero, but it never goes to zero. So it's never zero. And this is true as well for the next prize that I offer. This is not for the first person who did exactly the same, but for the new, it's called the generic memory. So what you have done last week is for the ideal memory. So now I generalized exactly the same problem. It has the Hamiltonian as well. This is the example. You see all the equations are now changed, but it's exactly the same. The point is called Hamiltonian is because it obeys an Hamilton's equation. In this case, for this particular memristor, it's a generic memristor. This is not ideal anymore. And the Hamiltonian is given on the lower right side. You will see that this is not the same. Has not the same interpretation as the ideal one. So it's another problem. And the generic case is in this equation. So the $1,500 prize is to solve this problem. The Hamiltonian is given on the lower right corner. And again, the important thing is that it has the Hamiltonian equation, and Hamiltonian is constant, is conserved, which is truly the unexpected thing. Most physicists will tell you this will be impossible because Hamiltonian is always thought that it's true only for things that are lossless. This has a memristor, is as lossy as you want, it's very dissipated, and yet it is conserved. I don't know the answer, and I hope somebody will come and claim the 1,500 prize for next week. There's a difference here. Unlike the previous one, it's just a tangent and just a monotone curve. This one look even more like what the physicists like to see, this little contour, okay? And this is what the Hamiltonian should look like. But the difference here is that it never intersects the x-axis, until t go to infinity, and that's the catch here. So it's truly amazing, so I don't know what the answer is. The Hamiltonian is given on the upper right corner. The 1,500 prize is to tell me what is the. Look at that. This is the solution. The Hamiltonian is given in the bottom, and it is a function for that given initial condition. It is constant, even though everything else is varying. Okay, so that is for next week. Again, this is now the trajectory, and starting from initial condition near the origin, if in the IV plane, we'll go back to that point, but it would take infinite time to go there. It never becomes negative. I keep emphasizing never become negative because one of you here, Max Zhang, sent me an email and said something is wrong with my story here, because he said, look, the memristor is supposed to have pinch hysteresis loop, So it goes through a zero at the same time. And therefore, since the inductor current is the same as the memristor current and the inductor voltage is the same, it says that the inductor current is in phase with the inductor voltage. And that's obviously wrong. Everybody from high school learns that the inductor current inductor is a 90-degree phase shift. Everybody knows that. Something is got to be wrong. And the reason it's not wrong is because you cannot talk about phase shift unless you have pinch points, right? But in this example, current never go to zero. So there is no point that it crosses the axis. So you cannot say who is lagging who, okay? So that's the fallacy here. So there's nothing wrong here. And that's why I keep emphasizing that the current never go to zero. You're either in the upper half or the lower half. So you don't talk about phase shift here. So there is no enigma here. Okay, now I'm going to spend the next half an hour really on something that's dear to most of you because you guys want to have this non-volatile memory, okay? So I have a criterion here just to make it more formal now. Remember, non-volatile simply means that you switch off the power and the memory didn't evaporate, okay? So a memristor, I call this a theorem. A memory is non-volatile if and only if the state equation has at least two stable equilibrium. When you pull the plug, you got to have at least two different memories. You can have more, but at least two. And when you talk about non-volatility, it refers only to the state equation. The Ohm's law equation is irrelevant. So you look always at the state equation and you put I equal to zero because that means pull the plug. And that you have to have at least two solutions. So for you guys who are people in digital computer, you're only interested in yes or no, binary, that's all you need. You need to have 2 points, x1 or an x2, where if you unplug it, when it's zero, they both go to zero. Okay, but I have the word here. A memristor described by that extended memristor equation, or it could be generic or anything, has two non-volatile memory if and only if we have 2 points, x1, x2, which are locally asymptotically stable. This is a very technical term, but it actually is important here. It has some stable. There are two kinds of stable pins. Some point is a little bit less stable than the other. The asymptotic one means that it perturbs a little bit, it got to return to the original points. For the important class of discrete memory, it had to be asymptotically stable. Okay, so the non-volatility study, the theorem, the more general is this one. It says that basically look at the last equation. This is for the generic memristor, for the extended memristor on top, equation 1, but it could be as well from generic or anything else. And it says that you have a continuum memory if you state equation f(x0), if I put a plug equal to 0, no matter what x is. So you can see this is much more general. Whatever x is, you just unplug, any x will do. And that's exactly what an ideal memristor is. So ideal memory is wonderful because you have a whole range. And this is when you want to make a brain and synapse, that's what you need, because you need to be able to tune continuity from one range, from one point to another point, and not just discrete style. So continuum memristor is very important. And the good news is that from what all I've seen, almost all the things that have been published are in fact continuum memristors. Okay, now I forgot to tell you that, of course, that, I did mention in the second lecture that the flash memory stick that all of you have been using is actually not permanent. It evaporates after about at least 20%, it's going to disappear. It's not permanent. But HP has published, Dr. Stan Williams' group, a paper, I think 3 years ago, which shows that at least for, in theory, the titanium dioxide memristor has a lifetime of 250 million years. Million, not just 10 years, 250 million years. So in my talk, I've been telling people that for SP memristor, like diamond, it's forever, okay? 250 million years is forever, okay? All right. Now, there are two types of memristor already. The first, you have the non-volatile type that are discrete. I mean, it's just a 2 point, and that's it, or 3 point, but this discrete. And there is the continuum one where you have a whole range, in principle from left minus infinity to plus infinity. But in practice, normally it's always a certain range, say 0 to 1. And then by virtue of the construction, after 1, instead of burning out, it would just stop and then becomes one value resistance. But as long as you have a range, an interval where every point is memory, that's continuum. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to show you next, and very important. I'm going to show you now 3 examples. All of the most Memristor equations that you see, they have to be nonlinear, and almost all of them, you will have to put in a computer and then look for the loop, whatever, and say, look interesting, but you have no intuition of what's going on. So I have actually spent time to cook up 3 examples that I'm going to show today that have exact solution, analytical solution. So you can go home and really look at the solution and say why it is behaving that way. All these 3 equations have a different behavior, and you can understand. So these are really textbook examples, and believe me, it's not easy to find examples like this, okay? This is in some sense the simplest example you can come by. Well, this example, look at the equation. The Ohm's state-dependent Ohm's law, in this case, very simple, given below, is just g sub 0 x squared. In fact, g sub 0 is just a scaling constant, because I'm going to talk about, say, 1 ohm, and everybody say, what's 1 ohm? That's unrealistic. Well, it's really 1 meg ohm or 1 k ohm, but g sub 0 is just a constant that you can scale it. But for simplicity, I get rid of irrelevance. So g0 is 1, so the memristor is just x squared. Whatever the state variable x is, you square it, and then that's the memductance. The important thing here is the equation, though. The state equation is f of x, which is shown in the right-hand side, and it is with a constant. It's translated by v. V is the voltage. Okay, and now, so the state equation is just that curve there, plus a constant v. And whatever that v, you can imagine that it's just so translating the curve up and down. So I cooked that this way so you can easily see. Okay. Now, by the way, just as a quick example to illustrate how powerful useful that formula, I gave you a piecewise linear formula, the half sum, half different than null formula. You can see that it has 2 breakpoints at minus 20 and 40, and the equation is always in the form below. So the linear term with the one with the x, the coefficient is going to be half the sum of the leftmost and rightmost curve. So it's minus 1 divided by 2 is minus 1. So you have minus x there, that's minus 1. And at minus 20, the coefficient that multiplies that x minus 20 is just the right half of the right slope minus the left slope. So it's 1 minus 1 is plus 1. So it's plus 1, half of plus 2 is 1. And likewise, the second breakpoint is 40, and the coefficient is just half the rightmost minus the leftmost is minus 1. Half of that is minus 1, okay? And then the constant term is if let everything go to 0, and then you want that to be 10, and that will give you 30. So it's just that easy, okay? And in fact, this curve, look at the formula, so messy, right? Well, using my same formula in 2 minutes, you can get the numbers below there. And by virtue of the fact that this is symmetric, the constant is always 0. So this is why this formula is so useful for those of you interested to construct examples. Okay, now for this, back to this interesting, this is going to be a very sentimental example for me, for reason I will see shortly. Okay, it is so simple, and yet it is, I said remembrance of things past. We talk about Memristor, and next we're going to talk about everything about memory, right? So here is something about, there's some memory here. This is the pitch hysteresis. Look at the loop. For amplitude 5, you have that shape. For amplitude 15, it's a different shape. So different input, even for the same sine wave, has different loops. So this is why The pinch loop is not a model, but it's a manifestation of what it is, okay? So these are just 4 of them at A equal to 1, and you can see that they're totally different. Okay, now the next, if there's one important concept we want to learn today, and that's pop. And it's easy to remember, you pick pop because it's like popcorn. You can just pop, okay? It's a very powerful concept. It stands for power of plot, okay? Pop is going to be everything is what we're going to use today. So what is pop? Basically, pop is it's just a code for power of plot of an extended memristor, which is any equation or generic, whatever, is obtained by plotting the following power of state equation. So power of state is just a state equation you've seen already, except that you put the input, in this case, v or I, 0. And you plot that in the dx dt with v equal to 0 versus x plane. So there is a theorem here. The non-volatile memristor theorem says that a memristor with a scalar state variable x, only one state variable, is non-volatile if its pop intersects the x-axis at 2 or more points with a negative slope. So it not only had to intersect, it had to have a negative slope. So here's back to this example now. Okay, you can see now that the pop happens to be, of course, the f of x, because when v is 0 is where that curve is, and that's pop. Okay. Notice that there are 3 intersections, so it fits the theorem. It has to have at least 2 points. You have 3 points here, but it has to have a negative slope. So the Q0 and Q1 are the one with the negative, and those are the stable point. The one in the middle are unstable, and why is that? Look at the arrowhead, and this is very fundamental, useful thing to learn today. It's called a dynamic route. A dynamic route is that to put arrowhead on the dx dt versus x plane that points into the direction where the motion should be going on. And now if you look at the upper half plane, think of x as the equator. Anything north of that, dx dt is the number dx dt is positive. So what does it mean? It means that x must increase. Increase means going to the right, right? So that's why it's pointing, the upper half it always point to the right. Vice versa, below that, dx dt is negative, so the motion has always had to decrease. X must decrease means always point to the left. This is so useful. In fact, I invented a mnemonic, just say, if north, go east, if south, go west. North, go east, south, go west. And the mnemonic for that is think of the Southwest airline. Southwest, okay? And I have no commercial interest in the South airline, okay? But this is just such an easy thing to remember. Southwest, and northeast. And it's just like Page Mill Road, separates El Camino. It's just like anything north of Page Mill Road is going to be one way to the east. Everything south of Page Mill Road is going to be one way straight to the west. That is, in fact, so important, so easy to remember. That's why I try to give you this mnemonic, okay? And because you will understand all of this intricacy of nonlinearity without really knowing anything about mathematics. That's all you need to know. It's just a dynamic route. And everybody can plot, just can remember Southwest airline, okay? All right. Now, now why are those points equilibrium point? Well, of course, equilibrium point, because at that point, dx dt is 0, they're in equilibrium, okay? But you can see also that if you take any initial condition to the left of 10, it's all going to converge toward Q0. Anything to the right of rather at 20, it will converge to the right Q1. Anything at Q2 is going to diverge. So Q2 is unstable. Now, I give you a physical analogy of what this is going on. So that's the curve on top is just what you saw. Let us associate it with the potential energy plot by integrating that with a negative. So the integral equation, the f of x is equal to minus integral of that. If you integrate that, you will see the sort of two-hum sort of ball there. And the minimum and the maximum point are exactly the intersection. So the equilibrium point is exactly the extremum point of this potential energy curve. And now you can understand easier that if you have any ball below the left, the hum, if we all set it down on the bottom left, it'll be at equilibrium point, binary state 1. Or on the right, you'll set it on the right. Anything on top is going to roll down. It's unstable. Okay, so this is in fact correct, and if you put interpretation of the reason why you need to have a unstable point that separates, and those two bottom points are called asymptotically stable, because if you perturb that point from the bottom a little bit, it's going to go back there. And likewise on the right, they are asymptotically stable. Okay, these are for discrete memory, but for continuum memory, like the Hamiltonian thing, you will see that everything just goes there, and it will stay there. If you perturb it, it just stay there, it won't come back. Those are stable. So there are two fundamental different concepts here. Okay. Now, if I now apply, say, a 15-volt battery, so the effect of the effect of the equation dx dt versus x, this is by the way called a phase plane. So it's just to translate it upward by 15 volt, okay, by 15, and you can see now that it has only one intersection point, but it has negative slope. So the dynamic route would say that is stable, asymptotically stable. Or in terms of potential energy analog, you see it has only one hum. Everything got to settle down to the bottom. Okay, so that's the correct interpretation, potential energy interpretation of that. If we have time, we'll come back and I'll show you. If you're on the left, how do you switch to the right? If you're on the right, how do you switch to the left? If we have time, we'll come back for that. Well, certainly during the discussion, remind me and we'll come back, because this is very instructive. Okay, and I will also show you that if you trigger ports, the one on top, the yellow one on top, if it is too narrow, it's not going to work. And if it is if it's too small, the amplitude is too small, it's also not going to work as well. So I call that switching failure, and I'll explain to you in the discussion section. If I forget, please remind me, okay? And this all has to do with this interpretation of this dynamic routes, okay? And now I'm going to show you, it's back the same equation now, but I now show you three curves. The red curve is the pop. Okay, the original, and then the next blue curve is the one with the 5-volt DC. So we're looking now, asking ourselves, can we define the DC VI curve of this device? Okay, question, what is the DC VI curve? I already told you last time that for the idea memristor, there is there is a DC VI curve, but it's only one point origin. Can we have other kinds of DC VI curve? The answer is yes, and it's very interesting. So we're back to this same example. Okay, but I'm giving it now a name called a corsage memristor for the region you will see. And now, remember, for every DC input, the intersection of that translated curve is the equilibrium point. Start with the pop. You have 3 points, but one of them is unstable. So you're going to see 3 points. Go a little bit up to 5 DC, you still have 3 points. The locations go vary, but still have 3 points. In fact, all the way from -10 to +10, you're going to have 3 intersections. Beyond 10, though, either way, you only have 1. So you can see now that it's very interesting. Between -10 and 10, you're going to have always 3 intersection points, and always 2 stable ones between an unstable one. And then beyond 10, there's only 1. Okay, and if you do that point by point, you can just do it. If I imagine, or you can do it when you go home. That's what you will get. And this is true DC curve. If you talk, what is a DC? This is what it is. And I say that I call this a corsage memristor, and I say it's remembrance of things past, because it's very sentimental. This is going back to days 60 years ago when I started to date my wife. And we brought her to a junior prom, and the rich boys, they were able to buy corsage with orchids on it. I don't have enough money to buy corsage, so I improvised. So I just bought a red ribbon, okay? So I got a red ribbon, and well, it's not quite red here today, but just to illustrate. So here's my ribbon. So I rubbed it around my wife. I said, I don't have one that has orchids in there, but here it is. This, it's my improvised corsage. Okay, it's an imagination of the corsage, and but look at this. This looks like that, right? Okay, and so that was, by the way, how I got to marry my wife. She was impressed. Okay, okay, all right. So that's why I call this now the corsage memristor. Okay, and this is going to be in the textbook, I believe me, because it's so pretty, and it's exact. It's not an imagination. And then surely I'm going to show you. I actually have an equation. You can see normally, if you have some curves, you cannot even write an equation, but just by fluke, I can give you an exact equation of this. Okay, so this is so nice. It's worth for a pinup. Okay, you can cut it out and put it in the bulletin board. And now, how do I get an equation? These are exact equations now. And you notice that, by the way, there are three. This is one continuous string. That's what's important here. And notice that at any voltage, there are 3 points. You see that until it's between minus and 10, there are 3 points. But the green part is the unstable one. So when you actually trace this in the laboratory, you're never going to see the green curve. You see only the red and blue. Okay, so there are two discrete memories. Okay, but interestingly, you look at on the left red curve, there's a little tiny region that has a negative slope. That is a signature that is locally active. We're going to talk about locally active next week. And when it's locally active, it means it's good news in the sense that you can actually make all kinds of interesting things happen, aside from making it chaotic if you want. But you can make an oscillator. And in fact, my colleague, Professor Kim from Korea, and his associate, Zubair and Chua, they were the one who made all these slides for me. I can't make this. So thanks to them, they actually just built an oscillator just by understanding what local activity means. Zoom into the negative slope, and they are writing a paper. A corsage memristor oscillator. Okay. Now, so I show you only the blue and the green, because the green part you will never be able to observe in the lab. You will only see one of these red curve. And this is very important that's why I call your attention for my latter part of my talk here. And so, in fact, so therefore this is a binary memory. At any voltage, you have two things. But if you are you want to make just an ordinary binary number, you just want to sense whether you're in the red or the blue. So we zoom in only near the origin. By the way, the slope there, the blue curve is about 2,500 Siemens. And the red curve, the tangent is 100 Siemens. So this is the binary memory for this. If you were to make this device and make it your binary memory, you have either 100 Siemens or 2,500 Siemens. Those were your binary bits. And so if you want to do computing, you just want to know whether you are low or high, right? So all you need to zoom in and into the origin, and you can see that there will be two straight lines like that. You have either a slope of 100 or 2,500 Siemens. Okay. Now, how do I get an equation of this? Well, this is why I didn't bring a red ribbon. I bring a measuring tape. Okay. Start at the far end, say 10. Just pick it up. Pick say minus 10. Make it at the origin and start laying there. This one string. Okay, laying up, and then so think of this tape now at a different scale that I have there, so that I get the correct answer. Okay, but yeah. So I now. The important thing is that every point has only one number. That's what's important. Okay, only one number. And so now if you do this, first you have this corsage curve, and now you straighten it, you mark it up, and then at the left that you make negative numbers there. Okay, and with that, every point along this curve, no matter how curved it is like this, it has a unique x. In fact, we already have one, the original curve. X now is my tape measure, okay? But the important thing is every point on the curve has one x. And so what is the current? The current is just x squared times v. So all I need to do is to multiply the upper equation by x squared, and I get the one below. And the equation is there. You see, notice the blue equation is just multiplying the top equation by x squared. There you are. Those are two exact equations that describe, this is called parametric equation, okay? And again, I say that this is remembrance of things past. Not only that the shape of that corsage curve reminds me, brings back memory of 63 years ago to the days when I was dating my wife. And now, later I realized that this curve is one continuous string, and it remembrance of things part to when I did my PhD thesis. That was part of my thesis. How do you describe equation that is one string, okay? And so this is all associative memory. I'm just telling you that because next week we're going to talk about our associative memory as well. It's all remembrance of things past. It's all related in that sense. So summarize, the corsage curve is in fact the correct DC VI curve for that memristor. And it has those two parametric equations with exact formula, and it is a function of x. X is just the state variable. So I have just a different tape with a different a nonlinear scale, but I have an exact equation. Okay. All right. That was one example. Second example. The first example, the corsage memristor example, is a generic memristor. The resistance does not depend on current. Now, this equation is cooked up in such a way. By the way, the memristance now, by the way, there's a missing I in the R. That should be multiplied by I. It's a typo here. But look at the right equation. So you can see that the memristance is just 0.01 x squared I squared. So it's an extended memristor. But more important is look at the state equation because we're interested today on the non-volatile memory. And we want to show this cubic equation. Again, normally you deal with anything that's cubic or more complicated, it's bad news because you really cannot find the roots. But I cook this up so that you can actually get the root exactly. Again, we will have an exact solution. But let's pretend you don't have the exact solution, and I'm going to show you how you get it if you don't have an exact solution. So the first thing you pop, look, always start with pop. So you set I equal to 0, and that is that curve on the left. And then immediately, if north go east, if south go west, there you have the arrowhead. That easy, okay? So you have almost the same thing. You have 2 points on the left and the right that are stable, asymptotically stable, and the middle point, the 0 one, is the unstable one. And the unstable one stay put no matter what. When you now increase I, unlike the previous example, you just translate up and down. This is a little bit more complicated. The shape changes a bit, but the feature remains the same. So now you can see it's not translated up and down, but you still have every DC, for every DC voltage, every one of these curves for one DC voltage. Okay? Only the red one is the pop, but every one of it is for one DC voltage. So you can imagine you can plot again the DC VI curve. So it makes sense to talk about DC VI curve. You just assign a current I, it'll be one of those curves there. Measure the intersection point. That will be 1 point on the DC VI curve. And you do that for enough points, you trace that, you will get what you see here. Now, of course, this is what you would imagine that you would do this in a lab. But I have cooked this up so that you can actually get this tree curve exactly. I will show you later on, okay? So it turned out that there are three curves. The one and the bottom one, the horizontal line that are dotted, are the unstable one. And that never changed, as you see, because the x equals 0, I equals 0 is always there. No, x multiplies everything. Look at that. Okay, x multiplies. So x0 is always. That is the bottom line. But the other two are the stable one, and you can be in one or the two branches. So this is interesting. This is the answer. This is the DCVI curve of this extended memristor. And it's different qualitatively because mine, the generic one, the corsage memristor, is one string. These are three different undisconnected, except they kiss at the origin. Okay, so it's therefore some people may feel uncomfortable. How can you call three segments a curve? Okay, it's actually three curves. Or in the corsage case, how can you consider that sort of corsage a curve? It's not. That's why I use the name plot. So in general, I call it a DCVI plot. Okay, that captures means everything, and DCVI includes the origin, you know, and okay. So that was DC. And so let's ask what about AC when you start to apply periodic signal. So let's pick a sine wave, and there you can see that for this example, for three different frequencies, you would have three pinch loops as expected, and you can see that at very high frequency it gravitates into a curve, a signature that is an extended memristor. So it has all the signatures. Okay, and now if you fix the amplitude and frequency though, fixed amplitude and fixed frequency, such as the one below, 10 amp and 10 hertz, on the left you see that you have actually two different pinch loops. This is people didn't realize that, and so it can, for the same input, same amplitude, just different initial condition. For a situation like that, you have two different pinch loops, and if you go to increase the frequency, eventually it degenerates into two separate curves. So you can see that this is sort of a very interesting example. It captures the generality of an extended memristor. Okay, and but there are three theorems that I have no time to go through today, but at least I'm going to be long enough so that for those folks of you who want to capture this and study it, this is the theorem. Okay, if we have time, we can come back here. This theorem essentially captures everything that I have just said, but it's a theorem. Okay. All right. Now let me move on now to, there are more examples. For example, this is a PTC, positive temperature coefficient thermistor. It has a DCV on the left-hand side. Now you can see that that curve has a negative slope. It's locally active. In contrast, the earlier one, this is a PTC. No, I'm sorry. I'll give you an NTC a little later. So I'm done with all the DCVI curve, and I actually have a very trivial example for those of you who just want to get the hang of it. Take that equation on the upper left-hand side and derive yourself the DCVI curve. And this is so simple, you can just do it in 3 minutes, and you will have the exact equation that will give you a feeling. But in general, it would, for almost all cases, except when you cook it up like what I did, I call those that I did, a bespoke memristor, because I cook it up so that you have an exact solution. Almost never you will have that opportunity. But this is one that you can easily try it out yourself. Hey, here's the NTC, negative temperature coefficient thermistor. It has a DCVI curve that is on the left-hand side this is locally passive. I'm sort of giving advanced billing here. Something that has a negative slope is locally active. In other words, back to this one, you know that you can make an oscillator out of that, whereas this is locally passive. You would never ever make an oscillator out of this. Okay, all right. By the way, I told you that the back to this extended memristor I showed you earlier, where you have these three separate curves, and I did that just by inspection, show you that for every DC you can plot it and you can get 3 points, and one of them, the horizontal axis, is always unstable. But I've cooked this out so that you can actually solve it directly, in fact, by quadratic equation, and the equation is right there. So this is an example that have an exact solution, just like the corsage memristor has an exact solution. Okay, right, and now back to this question: what happened when ideal memristor? You already know that the reason is going to tend to smoke is because for any DC voltage or current, you have to integrate that, and that integral would just go to infinity. So for ideal memristor or an ideal generic memristor, you are never in steady state, in the sense that the flux or charge will always be continued going to infinity. Okay, and so the correct answer to what is the dCVI curve of an ideal memristor or an ideal generic memristor is 1 point only at the origin. And I use that symbol there with a punch, a little holder to indicate that's my symbol for the dCVI curve of an ideal memristor or that of ideal generic memristor. Okay? And there is a name for this device, by the way. It's called a nonlinear. It was proposed already in 1961 by Professor Carlin and Euler. But it's not important for today's lecture here. Okay? All right. Now let me move on. This is important now. Let's go back to this to this three curve, this extended memristor. I told you that there are actually 3 curves, but one of them is unstable. So I'm sorry. Let's go back to the generic this corsage memristor. Okay, and there are three curves, but the green curve, remember, is unstable. So you will never observe that in the laboratory. So in the laboratory, if you build this device and you go to the lab and you want to measure the dCVI curve, you say, okay, I'm going to make the frequency very, very low, maybe 0.0001, okay? And then of course, all intuition says that is going to be DC. You already know, by the way, what the correct answer is that corsage curve is 1 string, okay? But if you do this in the lab, and no matter how low the frequency you go, you are going to see a different situation, because as you go along, start with the red curve, which is stable, but when you reach the tip where the green curve connects, suddenly the green curve, first of all, is unstable, and there's nowhere else to go, so instantaneously it got to jump up there. So no matter how slow your AC frequency is, you are going to be seeing something different. You're going to see something that jump up, and the real color you see is going to see that you apply with a sine wave on top, at a very, very low frequency, you are going to see something that will jump when you get to the tip, okay? And if you apply that, you can see where the jump comes from. So I call this a quasi-VI curve. And this is important because almost anybody in memristor understand when they plot the VI curve at very low frequency, they thought they have a dCVI curve. Well, they are not necessarily. They are quasi-VI curve, such as in this example, in the sense that if you really do a DC, honest to goodness analysis, you are going to have totally different. Like the corsage memristor, it's a perfect example. The curve here you see is nowhere near the real correct answer. These are quasi-memristors. And if you increase the frequency though, so say at 0.5, you have this red, at start at 0.1, you have this curve, we are still on the corsage memristor. You start with frequency of 0.1, which is well defined. They're all pinched. By the time you go to increasing to 0.9, 1, and it becomes a straight line in one direction. So they're all pinch loop as expected, converge to a straight line. Because it's generic. Or go backward and go lower in frequency from 0.1, the violet curve, and then to 0.01, the green curve. 0.001 is almost the vertical line, and by the time you go to 0.001, you have almost. So by you reach 0.001, you think you're home, right? You're DC, and that's where they come from, and they are quasi. Okay, all right. So let me now end my example. I'm going to go a little bit over time today, but this is an interesting example. The third, I told you there are 3 examples. The last 2 examples are all discrete. You have only 2 stable equilibrium points separated by an unstable one. This is an example of a continuum memory, and the Ohm's law is not so important, as I said. It's, when you talk about nonvolatility, you look at the state equation, and the state equation is given by below V over X. X is a state variable, V is the voltage. And I'm going to show you a picture here. Okay, so this picture, if you take a section here, it is 1 over x on top. When v is positive, you have 1 plus 1 over x. When v is negative, you have the lower half. So this is a kind of a trumpet, okay? And that is exactly the cross-section. So when v is positive, you have the right blue curve. And when v is negative, you have the lower green curve. And that's when the state variable x is positive. But there's a mirror image. I call this the left-right symmetry. And this is an important form of symmetry that I'm going to come back toward the end of my last 2 lectures. There's such a thing called parity symmetry in physics. You can see that there are exactly the same kind of symmetry here. So this is the picture that captures the essence of this last example. And now what is the pop? Well, the pop of this is when v equal to 0, right? Power off. So when v equal to 0, it's just the red axis. So the red axis is an impregnable wall. Every point on that curve is an equilibrium point. And that is the only equilibrium point. And all other curves are with non-zero v. You'll notice that they never intersect. And here comes again the Southwest airline thing. If you're south, you go west. You see, everything goes to the left. If you're north, you go right. That's the dynamics. It's that easy, okay? You immediately see what's the dynamic is. So you can see that you will never ever end up in the red curve because it keeps it's just like this is why I show you this thing. This thing goes to infinity. Okay? We start here, and it actually never goes to the horizontal line. It goes to infinity. And now this is a canonical example of what I call continuum. You can see every point is a memory. This is what you would like to have in your synapse. We're going to talk a lot about synapses in the future, in the next lecture. And this is what a synapse should be. And the good news is that for all the things that I've seen so far from HP or other places, they essentially have this kind of behavior. They have a continuum memory, except that they don't go to infinity because by the time they go to x equal to 1, it just collapses into just a pure resistance. But conceptually, that's what it is. It's a continuum memristor. Okay, it's this horn thing. Okay, 1 over x. Okay, now if you apply a periodic signal, so far that's DC. When it comes to periodic signal, then of course you will have things. And again, that vertical axis is a wall. So the pinch hysteresis never go beyond the wall. Okay, and that is the answer again to the question posed by Max Zhang earlier. Where is this 90-degree phase shift? Well, it never going to cut the wall, so there is no point. What inside there's no reference point, there's no phase shift to talk about. There's no paradox. Okay, all right. Now I'm going to finish. I just have to end my secret, but let me quickly tell you. Here's a hotel. This is a real hotel, by the way. If you've ever been to Vienna, go look at it. And this is called the Wunderwasser house. Okay, and Wunderwasser house is because it's Wunderwasser, one of my favorite pointers. He's an architect as well, and he's a great guy. He doesn't believe in straight lines, and I don't believe in it either. Remember, everything here is nonlinear in this code. He said a straight line is godless, okay? And he's one of my favorite painters, surrealistic. And you can see this is as surrealistic as it can be. And it's a real picture of a building. You can see every floor has a different level. And it's called the Wunderwasser house. Go to Vienna, look that up. You will see this thing, except the name Hilbert Hotel. Except that because I put that on for today's illustration. And for a reason. Why is it called Hilbert Hotel? Because this is next week's reader. Well, not quite next week already, because I have another reader, so I'm going to give you the answer. Hilbert Hotel paradox is the following. Well, Hilbert Hotel, like what you saw, has an infinite number of rooms. Okay, and aside from that, it is so realistic, it's actually infinite long. Imagine that. Hilbert Hotel was fully booked for New Year's Eve. At the last moment, however, each registered guest is fully booked, okay? And at the last moment, each register decided to bring a guest who needed a separate room. When the manager eventually managed, he was a mathematician by training, realized how to do it. He was able to fill everybody. So how do you do that? I'm going to come back to the answer later on. Think about it while I go through the next thing. The reason I'm telling you is to show you we're seeing a lot of things about infinity, and strange things can happen at infinity. Okay, so let's have some fun with infinity. But let me go on first because I'm going to finish my talk, and there are 10 things. 10 more things that you didn't know, and I promise 10 more. So I will quickly flash this so you can capture this and read at home. The first 3 things are there, okay? And then the next 3 things are there. They're all things that I'm sure you didn't know. And the last 3 things, so there are 10 things in addition to the last 10 things. So I'm telling you the truth, okay? And in fact, there are more, okay? But the last one you have already seen last week, the cat whiskers from the first detector or radio detector. It's a Memristor, for example. Okay, but let me move on to warm-up reads. Okay, some suggestion for something to read for next week. So these are the 3 warm-up reads. Again, I have this long enough so that you can pick it up and you replay it. Okay, and now what is next week's reader? Next week's reader is to decode the following hieroglyphic word extracted from a 17th century BC Egyptian papyrus. That's next week's reader. And I call this a reader because I hope you can find it, because that's a hieroglyphic. If you look carefully, pick up one of these, okay? But the lecture 5, that's the title, okay? Whatever that means, that is the title for next week's lecture. Well, thank you very much, and I will come back for a discussion. Thank you for your attention. So I'm actually on the dot. My graph says 0. And now we have another half an hour so we can relax and come back and we can have, I'm sorry, not quite yet. I was going to show you 2 things. I forgot the end code. I do want to have an end code. And the end code is interesting because it's about Einstein and Poincaré, two pillars. In fact, many people believe that Poincaré actually discovered the theory of relativity before Einstein. Okay, and anyway, they were chummy. So at one of those get-together, Einstein began to tell, I reversed the order. So Einstein started by asking Poincaré, he said, Henry is his name. Henry, I was a mathematician, actually, before switching to physics. So Poincaré said, why? But why do you do that? So Einstein said, I was fascinated at first by mathematics with its numerous theorems, but I could not tell which theorems are important. So Einstein switched, he says he doesn't understand the significance. So Poincaré said, Albert, it's interesting. I'm the opposite. I was a physicist before switching to mathematics. So Einstein said, but why? Well, Poincaré said, I was fascinated at first by physics with its numerous hypotheses, but I could not tell which hypotheses are true. So the moral here is that if you're a physicist, you should be careful on your hypothesis because it may not be correct. And when we come back in the discussion session, I will show you when you deal with infinity, a lot of hypotheses that involve infinity are actually wrong. Okay, and a very good example of this is unfortunately my good friend Professor Deventra had been insisting that he had discovered a mem capacitor. And he realized that I pointed out there is an infinity there, and he says that that's an exception, okay, and that's wrong. And when we come back, I'll show you why infinity will get you all messed up. So my end code for today is something that is a mixture of these two. Maxwell, James Clerk Maxwell, said there is nothing more practical than a good theory. You got to have a good theory, and it got to be solid. You know, it should not be just hypothesis, but it has to be deep enough to that you can predict things that you could not imagine. Okay, I'm sorry for skipping this, and now I am going to start by asking. Well, I'll pause for a few minutes, and then I will entertain questions. I noticed already a hand somewhere here earlier, so I guess you can start with you, right?
So,
Beg your pardon?
So,
Okay, we need a microphone. We do need that for the benefit of our worldwide audience elsewhere.
they told me to stand up.
And
so.
appreciate if you would kindly identify yourself so our audience will know who you are.
I'm Sue Charles at HP Labs.
Thank you.
And are you going to tell us the solution to the Hilbert Hotel today or next week?
Show out there.
The Hilbert Hotel?
The Hilbert, of course I can. Yeah. Let me ask, instead of flipping this thing, I'm just going to ask for a number, okay? Can I have 113? Can I have 113? The answer is very simple. The manner is simply move the guests that are registered. Those that stay originally for room 1, move to room 2. Those in room 2 go to room 4, 3 to 6, 4 to 8. So eventually he got all the guests properly registered, and then all the other rooms, all the odd number of rooms are now available for the next guest. That's the answer, okay? That's what infinity does for you, okay? It tricks you into thinking something into something, and that's exactly what Deventer is a pitfall that many physicists, including Deventer, unawareingly step into, and the the sad part here is that many of them don't realize that it was a mistake, and they would insist that they are correct. And okay, now let me. Before I entertain more questions, I want to show you some reason why this infinity is such a tricky thing. So let's start with Leibniz series. Leibniz, by the way, for those who didn't know, has been advocated to be actually the discoverer of calculus and not Newton. But even though he was born 4 years later than Newton, by the way, those who didn't know, Newton was born on the day where Galileo died. I'm bringing all these famous figures because they're all related. When the day Galileo died, Newton was born. 4 years later, Leibniz was born, okay? And then we will come back to talk about Galileo's student in a minute from now, so they're all related in some way. Okay, so the correct answer to the Leibniz series is the one on top. You see that there are negative signs, minus 1/3, minus 1/7, minus 1/5, okay? Leibniz series, by the way, if you're German, it's Leibniz, okay? See, it's pi over 4 is exact. And I mean, everybody agrees it is correct. The correct answer to this series is pi over 4 or 0.7854. But the trick here is that let's rewrite this equation on top, the series, in such a way that the negative term with negative is always moved to the last. Okay, you can see it's the same. It's just I move the negative one always to the end, okay? And now, the reason I do this is because now you can easily see that the first term is positive, the second term is positive, the third is positive. In fact, you can show just by induction that all of the terms, when you do it this way, they're all positive. And if they're all positive, certainly L should be larger than the first one, which is just 1 plus 1, 5 minus 1/3. But that is just 13 over 15 is 0.866. So it says that from this arithmetic, it simply said that the length, the L, the number L, is going to have to be whatever that is, got to be greater than 0.866. But the correct answer is less. It's 0.78. Okay? So you can see that obviously the one below are wrong because we know an exact answer for us. And that's what infinity does for you. And next example, another exercise. Look at the series on upper left. Again, you see all this, the negative number, minus 1/2, minus 1/4, minus 1, etc. So now, so let's rearrange this order, okay? And I'm going to move the negative numbers always pairwise. So 1 minus 1/2, I'm going to move the next one that's negative is minus 1/4, always pairwise. Okay, and then move on that is minus 1/6, minus 1/8. I'm free to do that. We learned that from grade school, right? You can do that. You can move the order. And now I can sort of put some parentheses, and again, you are allowed in arithmetic. You learn from grade school. So it's the same equation. I do that so it's easier to illustrate. But now you realize that the first parenthesis is quantity is just 1/2. And then you copy the minus 1/4. The next one, 1/3 minus 1/6 is just 1/6. You copy the minus 1, and you keep doing that. And you can factor out 1/2 from there. And that's 1/2 times whatever you see there. But whatever the multiply 1/2 is exactly the one on the first row. That's x. Okay? So therefore, x is equal to 1/2 x, where the only x that satisfies that is 0. So x is equal to 0. Nothing wrong with that, right? Your grade school arithmetic, any kid would say that's okay. But it turned out that the answer is wrong. The answer, in fact, let's just don't move the things around. So you add the first two terms, and the next two terms, no, don't move things around. You can see it's 1/2 plus 1/12 plus 1/30. It's always positive. So it's got to be positive. And that is the correct answer. The answer is a positive number. It's not 0. Okay? Well, the reason, the answer to all of this, why you getting contradiction, is because of the infinities. In fact, you may not realize, if you have an infinite series, infinity is really a tricky thing. If you have an infinite series that converges, like what we have seen, but if you add up the absolute value of that and it diverges, then the terms in that series can always be rearranged so that number, that series can convert to any number you wish, not just those that I show you. So this is to show you how tricky it is for that. And now I'm back to this favorite picture of mine for today. That's another infinity here. Well, this is called Torricelli's horn. Torricelli, most of you probably remember from high school physics, is the inventor of the barometer. And Torricelli was the student of Galileo. So all these names are now associated today. And this is a very interesting horn. If for no other reason, we already saw that in my last extended Memristor example, but it's even more interesting because if you integrate this, because we have the equation, so you can integrate that. Oh, by the way, this is, people call that now a Torricelli trumpet because it's like a trumpet, except that it is infinitely long and thin, okay? But the interesting thing, paradox here is the following. This is Torricelli, by the way. You can actually calculate the volume by simple integral. You can integrate that, and you see the volume is actually exactly equal to pi. No question about it. It's just two steps. You can all do it, okay? Now, the length, of course, you can think it's infinite, but you may not appreciate the length is infinite. But it's easy to say the area. The area, again, you can integrate that, the surface area. It's a little bit more tricky because you have to do something, but you can prove rigorously that the area is infinite. Now, this is the paradox. The volume is pi, is finite, exact. But the surface area is infinite. How is that possible? Imagine this Torricelli thing. Let's imagine that this is, you build this and you like put it this way, upside down. So you have a funnel kind of thing with the infinite end, okay? And let's say you get a pale red paint, pull it over, okay? And you feel it, in fact, maybe 1 can. It's pi. Let's call it a unit pi. Pi units of paint would fill this. So the volume is finite. Okay, now let's pull up this paint and start to paint this over. And you see that it's not going to go very long, and there's a lot of things that's unpainted because the surface area is infinite. So that's the paradox. In fact, after you pull out the paint, the inside, you think of this as an infinite thin wall, the inside is going to be all red, right? So it's all painted, but the area is infinite. How is that possible? Well, that's it, because it's infinity. In fact, this has plagued great thinkers for many years, and I'll show you just one comment, one from my favorite philosopher. He's a great English philosopher and a thinker, and actually a mathematician as well, and his name is Thomas Hobbes. How many of you have heard Thomas Hobbes? Well, great. I'm impressed that we have so many people here with liberal arts background. And okay, well, Thomas Hobbes says to understand Torricelli's horn volume versus length or area paradox, it is not required that a man should be a geometrician or a logician, but that he should be mad. And so again, the moral here is you got to avoid infinity at all costs. And I message to my good friend, Professor Ventra, watch out for infinities, because that's where the pitfall is. That's where you made your mistake. Okay? So finally, a lot of people, I've been telling people that Memristic phenomena are not inventions. People say you invented. So I didn't invent. They are discovered. Just like you don't say that Columbus invented America, right? You say Columbus discovered America. Okay, so that's what it is. Columbus did not invent it. So this is the same as Memristor. Okay, and I think I finally got to the point where I want to share. Now we got still 10 minutes for more questions from the audience. With some about infinity. Well,
So, Leon, I think there's actually a very important an interesting lesson from the solution.
Could you identify yourself, please?
Okay, I'm Stan Williams, and I think there's a very important lesson from your solution to the to your first challenge that you made about the conservation of flux, and I wonder if you wouldn't mind just sort of going over that a little bit with people.
Great. Yeah, in fact, I should.
And essentially showing how it actually provides alternative ways of solving circuit equations.
Thank you. I should, because we have a 1,500 prize for next week. And could you switch to 4-27? Okay, so as I said, there are three correct responses. Dr. Stan Williams, Shencheng Xu, by the way, who I thought it was, because he sent me an email and just didn't identify himself. So I thought this is a bright student somewhere from Europe. And then I got a reply back from him, said, no, I'm 50 years old. Okay, and I was offering him that maybe perhaps I could propose you to be an SP intern if you're interested. Okay. That was his answer. And then came just yesterday, Professor Fernando Corinto, a very distinguished researcher from the University of Torino. So we have three correct answers. Okay, and the correct answer is the following: if you write Kirchhoff's law, okay, just like I reorder the reference point so that you can make it easy. So the voltage Vm, which is the memristor voltage, plus the inductor voltage, of course, is 0. And we integrate both sides. Now I start to integrate from 0, so that the tail of that is just the initial condition. So the tail is a constant that I put on the right-hand side, that's 5, 0. So from Kirchhoff's law, you get the next equation. But we already know from my axiomatic treatment, the first term is just a flux of the memristor. The second term is just a flux of the inductor. Okay? And if you look at the equation of the memristor, is 1/3, the considered relation is 1/3 x cubed plus x. The inductor is Li. L is 1, so phi is equal to I. But the Hamiltonian is just exactly the sum of those two. So the correct answer is that the Hamiltonian in this case happens to be just the sum of the flux of the memristor and the flux of the inductor. Okay, and so what is being conserved here is flux. So as simple as that. That's a $1,000 reward. But the next one is not so easy. Oh, by the way, you can again look at this Hamiltonian. The interesting thing here is that this is just the red curve is cross section at x at I Hamiltonian h equal to 0. You can see no matter what cross section you have, it's always a curve. It's not a contour. You know, and normally, so that's the first surprising thing for most physicists when they think of Hamiltonian, they think of the solution, the cross section are always contours. Well, this is not. Okay, but in the next problem, I have up the ante because it's harder. As you saw earlier, there are contours. Okay, in this one, by the way, the solution all go toward v equal to 0. I toward I equal to 0, but never get to 0 because it takes infinite time to get there. That's one other thing, by the way, you should remember. And that's one of those things, again, infinity is important. Okay, this is because this leads to a lot of misconception. If you have a differential equation that are well defined in the sense that it's continuous, you know, everywhere and differentiable, no matter where you start, put any initial condition and assume that it doesn't oscillate, so it goes to the equilibrium. Even though like that, it goes to equilibrium, it will always take infinite amount of time to get there. So that you are never, in principle, and you know, and that of course for most people they say that's trivial. What's the difference between 10 to the minus 50? But it makes all the difference of something that's right and wrong. Okay, it was never negative. This is why there's no fallacy in this inductance current being lagging the voltage by 90 degrees. Okay. Oh, now the $1,500 price is where I up the ante, and it's generalization, direct generalization of this example that I just posed. Except now that let me give you first the example so you can see it. Now V is equal to xi. It's now a product of the two, and the state equation is I squared minus 1. Okay, so which I rewrote on the right-hand side. And now, if I divide both equations by I will get I minus 1 over I, and then the bottom one will be minus x. So it's an exact parallel of the previous one, except it's just a different equation. And if I call I dt to be d tau, then I will get the middle one in the bottom, and that is the state equation. It's different from the one from last week, but you can see a similar form. But the important of that is that if you define the Hamiltonian as in the lower right corner, if you differentiate that with respect to I, you will get the first equation. So the dx d tau is the first Hamiltonian equation is partial h with I. If you differentiate the second the Hamiltonian with respect to x, you will get the second equation, because 2 times 1/2 is x. You get a second equation, so that is the second Hamiltonian equation. So in other words, this circuit with this example equation obeys Hamilton's equation. Okay, and I will show you the solution in a minute from now. It's contour, but before I do that, I just want now to generalize this to an even more general form, and that's where the price $1,500 is. You can now let that be any m of x. Of course, it has to be continuous singular, and g of x has got to be always positive, because you have to divide that by gxi. So g of x has got to be positive. But with that, everything will go through. Okay, and now the state equation in this generic Memristor now is given in the lower middle part. And if you define the Hamiltonian as the one on the lower right, based on these 4 new functions, m, g, and f, you will see that equation obeys Hamilton's equation. So this is the most general form. And I don't know how to interpret this, and I hope that one of you will come forward for the $1,500 price. And again, thank Stan Williams for contributing the $1,000 already of that price. Okay, so now back to this second equation I just showed you moments ago. The Hamiltonian is on the left-hand side. Okay, you can see that there's a wall in the middle that separates them, and so that no matter where you start, the cross section is never going to penetrate the wall, and it showed that I is never negative on the left, and the right I is never positive Okay, so there is no pinch points. In other words, okay, there's no way you can talk about phase shift here. So you don't have to worry about that your intuition being violated, that the current inductor should lag the voltage by 90 degrees. So this is the $1,500 question. Okay, any other questions? If not, then actually, I give me another 5 minutes because I thought I had promised to show you the how to switch. Can I go to 54? Okay. Now let's say look at the left-hand side. Let's say you are operating at Q at the red curve in the left intersection point that I call Q. So I'm a little poor eyesight. It's Q0, I believe. Okay. So you're there, and that's your binary state, zero state. Now you want to switch to 1. And how do you do it? Well, and by the way, I'm showing this because this also is intuitively similar to what the axial potential. You know, when you shoot an axial potential, as I've described in the first lecture, it will boom, go up. And then, but it takes a long time, well, much more long time relative to the boom part, to go back to steady state. And that part, in fact, is called a refractory period. It means that if during this part where it's settling down, you put in another pulse, no matter how big, you're not ever going to get another pulse. That's called a refractory period. Biologists don't understand why. They just say that this is what happened, okay? The phenomena is very similar, in fact, to something like this here. But you can see now that as soon as you put in a trigger pulse, because it's an instant pulse from 0 to A, amplitude A, it's going to, the red curve disappears, and instantaneously you see the blue curve lifted upward by A. Now, when you do that, you can see that there's only one intersection point. So therefore, you are, but your initial condition X stays there because it's instantaneous. You're now all of a sudden at the red point on top. You are in the northern hemisphere now. You know, remember X is the equator. Your north go east, or if north go right. So the arrowhead points the direction. And it takes time, so that let's say at that time when the yellow pulse tau t equals delta t, if that's a pulse width, you stop. You turn off the switch, but so you revert back to the red curve, the pop. You go back to pop. So you now are at the new starting point on pop, but you are still in the upper half plane. You're in the northern hemisphere. You go east. So keep going until you get to point 2. So you switch that way. Conversely, if you're on the right side, you're in point 1, you want to go from point 1 to 0, you're from state 1 to 0, you put in negative pulse of amplitude A, so it will lift instantaneously the curve to the green curve below by A, amplitude A. And now the red pop curve disappears. By the way, all these other curves, I would call it a bias pop, okay? Because it's electronic, when you put a DC voltage, we say it's biased. So with pop is when there's no bias, and when you have a DC voltage or DC current, it's a bias. So you have a bias curve, bias pop now, the green bias pop, and the drop instantaneous that point below it on the green curve, and then you're now southwest airline, right? Go left, west. So you go arrowhead. But by the time you reach about where the yellow box is, your time is up. You're back to nothing. You switch off. But then you're back to the pop. But it's a point on the red pop and pop curve, and so it's not equilibrium. But it would follow. You will follow the direction, the dynamic route. You're in the lower half plane. You still go left, west, southwest. Okay, and eventually, you're going to get to Q0. Again, how long will it take? It will take infinite time, in principle. But in all practical purposes, it's within 3 time constant. So you're there. That's how you switch. So you now can see how you switch. Yes?
We have to stop.
Stop. Okay. I'm done. All right, but you should just look at it. I'm going to switch off just one more time. And then you can copy this. You can copy this, and you can read it. If it's too short or too hard, you will fail to switch. Thank you very much for your attention.